thanks everybody for showing up. This is Space.com's first big event. This is our gallery showing featuring the art of Ed Belbruno. Many of you know Ed and his art, and what we're hoping to do today is illuminate it a little bit more. We've got a couple of his friends here who really know the art world, and the science world, and the math world, and the space world, to digest what Ed's been doing and help us process it a bit. And then afterwards, we're going to go over and look at some of his pieces. So let me introduce Ed Belbruno from Princeton University, mathematician, scientist, artist, Wonder Man. Next to him is Bob Vanderbei, who is a Princeton polymath who just pretty much is mathematician, works in finance, space, many different areas, and we'll dig into a few of them. And at the end is Robert Mars, who is a locally based New York pop artist. Focuses on contemporary pop art, although he tells me he's now expanding into quilts, which I'm blown away by, and there's a lot of math there. So we may get to that by the end of the conversation. Yes. I wanted to start by bringing the art that Ed's doing into the science that he's doing, because so much of what we're going to talk about today is the art and what inspires art. But we also want to remember that because of the art, Ed's been inspired to do a lot of interesting science and math. So the first thing I was going to ask is if you could go ahead and just describe a little bit about, how is art going to get us to the moon or to Mars?
Well, the first time I had the opportunity to work on that, I was sort of given the problem back in the dark ages in 1985 to get a small spacecraft to the moon, at least on paper, and I was given a strict time limit to do that. So I understood the math to do that was extremely hard and was beyond my capability at that time to do anything. So because I had a strict deadline, I said, I got to find a way to find this route. So I just did what comes natural. I did a painting of the Earth-Moon system. And the way the art came into it was the painting had brushstrokes done in a very pronounced fashion. And I noticed that some of the brushstrokes were going from the Earth to the moon in a way which I was sort of thinking about, that my conscious mind really couldn't come to grips with, but the artistic freedom just sort of freed that up. And when I went to the computer and tested it out, it really worked and got the desired route I was looking for. So
your conscious mind kind of got in the way, and then as you were doing your art, you were able to let go and step back and see these things.
Yeah, the conscious mind completely messed it up, so to speak.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I'm doing art in general, if I start to think about it, I stop painting immediately because, as I usually say, my mind is like not my friend. Right. So it's going to mess the painting up a little bit, actually a lot. So I try to keep it completely in what I call the zone.
And getting out of the frustrations, whether it's the frustrations with the math or the frustrations with whatever you're focusing on, is kind of key to all of the work that you guys are doing. And Rob, you for your inspiration just to be completely creative, and then Bob for take the NASA project that you're working on. How does art help you escape, or in your case, it might also be, you've talked about the beauty of the mathematics. How does the aesthetic help you step back and allow your brain to open up again?
That's a really hard question. I mean, for me, what I like a lot about the project I'm working on for NASA is the geometry of it, and geometry is very physical and it's beautiful, and so the designs that we've come up with, some of them are really artistically beautiful as well as scientifically meaningful, and so for me it's a close intertwine. I mean, maybe I'm different from the average person, but it's sort of my mind. It's the same part of my mind, I feel like, for me.
I'm going to agree on that point, and we're going to hit it pretty hard because that's one of my pet points. But I'm going to jump to Rob first, give all of you a chance to kind of open up a little here. And Rob, one of the things that you've talked about is the iconic nature of certain aesthetic things, whether it's people. I know you've done some Marilyn Monroe work, and you've had iconic brands represented, whether it's Zenith or Hamilton or whatever. And then you mix it in with other just purely aesthetic elements, whether it's the textures that you're using or the colors that you're using. Is that approach somewhat similar to what they're doing, but the outcome, instead of a plot to Mars, is a painting? Although nothing wrong with that. Painting's just as cool as a plot to Mars. But is that what you're building out of it, or is that something where you have to let go to be able to create in that way?
Well, I mean, I think what we all do is problem solve. My problem solving is different than, the end result is different than what you guys do. Well, not you, Ed, but. And I think that's kind of all it is you you're presented with these things, right? There's paint, there's collage material, you know, and then your imagery, and you sort of say, I want to do this as an end result, and then how do you get there?
Right.
You know, and that can change. It's never like going to the moon, right? There's not one path. There's billions of paths. It's the same thing. Like you know, you make choices as you're going along, and you say this piece works as you're going, and then you know it becomes a part of the end result.
So for all of you, it seems like you find your own approach to accomplishing whatever it is you're trying to do, and you've arrived at this point in this stage of your career where you've used this whatever mechanism, but this kind of escape to free yourself to do the work that you do. Do you think that that's something that is more universal? I know, Ed, you've talked about some things about how does that fit into human nature or beyond? What?
Okay, so my personal belief on that is that the real creative forces, so to speak, are coming from, for lack of a better word, the subconscious. But it's probably deeper than that. It's coming from what I consider a connection to the universe. Mm-hmm. And one can discuss what that means. But the more you disconnect from your conscious mind, the more you get a connection to the universe. And then if you get a really good connection to the universe, which I try to strive for, then the universe gives you the right answers. You don't have to worry about it. So you just put the idea out there, I would sort of like to do this. And then you free yourself up, the answer just pops into your mind. It's almost instantaneous. So there's a huge reservoir of information out there that our minds just completely block off.
Right.
So the way I access that is to try to say, okay, conscious mind, you're turned off, and let my hands sort of move on a canvas, and the paint tries to communicate with something else that's there. Now, it doesn't even have to be in the moment. I did a painting in '09 which had 2 clocks in it. That I didn't even know why I did that painting. It was sort of like, well, why would I do that? Because it was completely different from any of my other work. And then in 2012, I published a paper on 2 different time scales. Actually, 2014, 2 different time scales in the universe. And those time scales were very similar to what happened in that painting. So that, in a sense, the painting was actually predicting that result. But at the time, I had no clue that was happening. So when you connect with that area, I would just say weird things can occur, and the things that we have absolutely no understanding of whatsoever.
And you wrote a great column about that, about the cyclical nature of the universe and how that inspiration happened. But to have that separation is kind of interesting. Have you guys experienced that as well, where there's...
I mean, I think with making art, this sort of goes back to being a kid and skateboarding, because I skateboarded for 25 years of my life.
So you weren't just a kid in skateboarding,
I wasn't
you were
just,
a professional. So you can
no, I was not
that.
professional at all. Not at all. I love doing it. But one of the things for me that was so appealing was this sort of control and then chaos. Like, you're riding the board and then you'll do a trick, and in the midst of that trick, you're in the air and your board is sort of in chaos under your feet, and it comes back to your feet. And I think with art, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, there's parts of my art that I give to the world, right? Like, I'll paint this beautiful surface, and then I'll take sandpaper to it. So it's like, that's the chaos part of it. Like, just seeing like this part of it, I allow, you know, the sandpaper to sort of do what it does, and then pull it back.
And you've got different layers in the texture. I mean, I think part of it, maybe just take a minute and describe the textures that you create, because there are a lot of layers in your painting that you're kind of releasing as you open it.
Right. So that sort of goes back to history, and you know, when you look at old weathered signs and things like that, you can kind of see the years. You can see the sun that's been on it, you can see the weather that's been on it. And to me, that was very appealing, because everything has a history, you know, and to me, that was what I wanted to convey in my work. Like, there was a history. So I'll build up layers of newspaper, old magazines, things like that, and that'll be the base layer. But then when I take sandpaper to it, you'll see things, you know, you'll see typography and things like that underneath coming through. I think that's part of just allowing it to do what it does.
Bob, you have the same experience with your work?
So my work, I think, is a little bit different. I find nature to be beautiful. And so I'm an amateur astrophotographer. I was just an astro viewer for a few years, and got into photography. And it is beautiful, and I like to record that beauty. And so it's not something I'm creating, it's just something I'm appreciating and recording. And so,
although you are creating in the sense that you're capturing it, because you've done a couple pieces for us as well, and some gallery pieces, and you frame the shots. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not just taking a picture and letting the camera do the work.
That's right. That's right. And so there's always a little bit of both parts. There's sort of what's sort of universally or fundamentally or naturally beautiful, and what's created by a human mind, and that can be influenced by cultural aspects and well, we see red, green, and blue. So I mean, our eyes are different from other aliens or whatever, and so how we would like to look at things might be different from others, but I don't know. It's I think there's both of that, and I think your art has a lot more of a cultural aspect to it, and trying to relate to our society and people and stuff, and the art that my part of the art is more of recording the what's out there. But I think both of those have the same aspects to it. I mean, I think if there were aliens who came to Earth and saw your art, even if they didn't understand the cultural part of it, they would still think, that's cool, that's beautiful.
Yeah. But I think also, to going into, you say all I do is take photos, but there's a choice, because there's a billion choices out there of what to take. You have to look at it and determine what is the right choice.
There's only 100 choices.
Right. But you have to determine that. Like, it's you looking at it and you making a decision that, that's the right thing.
Yeah.
So do you guys feel like in our society, well, this is a loaded question, so the answer is no. Do you guys feel like in a modern society we really allow these sorts of thoughts to naturally occur? I mean, when you have had the experiences you've had, you've created environments for yourselves where you've let go and allowed these things to happen. And when we all went to school, and I think that's right, when all of us were in school, it was art was one thing, math was one thing, science was one thing, history was one thing, Shakespeare was one thing. Is that the right way to go, or are we missing out something there when we let go of the fusion and focus on these little pillars?
Can I come in?
Yeah. Ed, this is your show, man.
Well, for years I tried to combine them together, because I had this intense interest for the art since I was 7 years old. It was always space-oriented. But then when I got into mathematics, it was completely different. And when you're going to graduate school of math, you don't have the luxury to do any art.
Right.
All you're doing is that. So when I got out and started to do it professionally, I said, well, I have this art background. Let me try to combine these things together. And for me, it was a disaster. So the way I currently view it is they're totally separate. The art side is done when the mind is letting go and you're not having any rules at all. You're sort of tapping into something. And of course, when you do a painting, it's not just going crazy on a canvas. You have to pay attention to artistic beauty and how the art has to go with texture, color balance, on and on. However, so you're letting go, and it's really that process. And if you try to put structure on it, you can really ruin it. Whereas in the mathematics world or the science world, you have very strict guidelines. So you can't be working with mathematics and just say, well, I'm not going to worry about the distributive law. You just have to use that.
Right.
So it's very much, I view it like a straitjacket.
The distributive law is beautiful.
What's the Lord is right.
Good,
I might
good.
disagree with Bob. Yeah, I might disagree with Bob. I think it exists, but I'm particularly...
Well, but you raise a good point. I mean, you can't... There's something about being a little philosophical about it and something about the practical nature. If you're in graduate school, you have to learn the pieces to be able to do this.
Right.
But I guess where I'm focusing is culturally, because you're exactly right, and you're raising really good points about why you need to have the fundamentals and be able to use those.
Right.
But are we learning the fundamentals in a way that allows us to be innovative, or are we learning the fundamentals in a way that we kind of get lost and distracted? Or I mean, shoot me down if I'm wrong. I mean, is it something where we really do need to keep things separate and let things happen the way they fit regimental?
I mean, I feel like things are always going to cross over, and like you said, Ed, maybe math and art don't mix like oil and water, but you got to agree that one sort of help the other out.
Yeah.
So it's like they might not cross over, but they inform each other on some other level.
Yeah, there's like like you had mentioned this before when we had talked, there's like a filter. So when for example, if I do a work of art, even though I'm not thinking math, it's somehow it's on that painting, whether I want it or not.
Right, because it's your history. Everything. Art is you conveying sort of everything that's inside, and math wouldn't so much be in my brain because it's not.
Yeah.
It's something that's very difficult for me. But other things are there. So it's like, but that will come out in my work.
Yeah.
What about you, Bob? Because you're in the middle of this in terms of the environment that you're in. You've got a fusion of art and math in sort of your world.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's two kinds of things. There's a left brain and a right brain, whatever that means. 'Cause I don't even know which brain I am, but I'm the nerdy of the two.
That's good. I like that at space.com.
And so, to me, as I've said, the art is very close to the science. It's what I find beautiful about it.
Right.
But I love to go to an art show and see art that's got a cultural basis to it as well. So I don't know.
So does that bring us back to the aesthetic and the aesthetic appearing in all of these things that are not necessarily just art?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So even though, like with Rob's work or the photography he does or some of the work I'm doing, there's a natural, I think, beauty to these things. And if there wasn't, you wouldn't want to look at them. Maybe people don't want to look at them anyhow. But I mean, there's this desire. Yeah, there's something beautiful about that. So I think underlying all this is the beauty. I think you're exactly correct. Once you get through that part of it, then it's the other part of, okay, what does that mean, or how's it filtering through?
Well, and as Rob mentioned, the interpretation, and everybody's bringing a different set to the table.
Yeah.
And exactly that. I'm going to actually go ahead and open it up to questions, and so don't hesitate to shoot your hand up and ask something that's burning out. Yes.
I have a question, as always. So you guys were talking about the whole separation, basically. Okay, I have a lot of questions, I'm sorry. So you were talking about how problem solving with like art using the subconscious and kind of tapping into the subconscious and getting away from your conscious mind in order to kind of come to different results in art and when you're approaching a piece. And what I was also interested is for you, as an astrophysicist, like, I mean, I'm an astro major myself, like, I'm sure when you're doing a physics or trying to work in theoretical physics or whatever, like, I imagine you have to have like some sort of creative intuition as you're trying to approach problems and trying to come up with new results. And I was curious about like your own personal process when you approach that.
Well, there are those aha moments, right?
Yeah.
And some people wake up in the middle of the night with their aha moment, and I think that's happened to me once or twice in my life. I feel really the opposite of what Ed feels, is that the deeper I dig into it and the more focused I am on something that I like, then I get that aha moment while I'm focused, rather than sort of, trying to get it out of my mind and then all of a sudden something happens. So I just think different people are different, though, and that's how it works for me. How's it work for you?
I mean, I'm still an undergrad, so I'm not quite there yet in terms of theoretical like problem solving. I know for me as a physics major, and anyone who in this room who's taken a physics class or math class has problem sets, like I always do much better when I like look at the problems even like a week before the problem sets due, right?
Yeah.
Like looking at the night before, it doesn't help because if you give yourself that span to just even read them, and then you have a week to let, I don't know, your subconscious mind kind of like work at it, and then you come back to it, you're like, oh, this isn't actually as bad as I thought it was when I first looked at it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's definitely true.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I can remember very specific situations where I failed an oral exam, at least I thought I did, went home at Christmas time and was sitting on my parents' couch like a week later, and I'm like, oh, that was really easy.
Oops.
Oops, exactly.
Ed, yeah, you could.
Yeah, there was one comment that you had made about an aha moment, and I think that's one area of distinction that I have between art and, say, mathematics/science, is when as Bob was saying, when you dig into a problem in the sciences, and you're just going through like slash burn through a forest,
right.
and you see suddenly there's a way to solve it, you'll get your aha moment, but it's momentary. It's like, oh, I got that, and then you just the next 20 years you're working it out. And so it is like a moment of inspiration.
Yeah.
How you get that, who knows? But I mean, we have a little bit different approaches. But But however, the arts, when you do doing like it can be sculpture or whatever it is, a painting, and when you're really what I call the zone, where you let go, you're not in the aha moment for a second. You're in it for hours.
Right.
So, an effective painting is you're living in the aha moment, and that's entirely different.
And it's interesting you bring that up because I know with Bob, you had this article written about you when you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
And it was for 4 oil paintings you did that really are stunning. They're on your website. People should check this out. And it's the only paintings that are out there. But one of the things that came up was that you were able to paint for like 3 hours at a time, whereas a lot of adults, and you're a professional, so you probably can handle jumping right in, but a lot of adults just really can't handle more than an hour and a half. But you were able to let go for that length of time.
Yes, but let me just add one subtlety to that. I was painting something that that was a picture that somebody else had painted, somebody else had done, and I was copying it. So I was technically capable of doing things. I wasn't creating, so it wasn't sort of what you do, where you're sort of creating something that's you're in a zone, I was in a technical way doing the best job I could at making something look like that. And I was pretty good at it.
But you know what? It was a representation. So when you have, like, for example, the clown, that may explain why the clown was so expressive. I'll give you that. But you also had some of these like forest scenes and things. So no matter what it was that it started as, it wasn't an exact copy. And we've
true.
talked offline a little about this, where you can have a wave, and it can be a mathematical equation. It can be a hokusai painting. It can be the wave itself. It can be a photograph. None of them are identical. They all are representative. And unless you have a full and complete water wave, none of them are truly representative. So there's always going to be some interpretation or something that's off.
That's true.
And maybe it's one of the other things we've been focusing on here is the letting go. So maybe the letting go will express itself in different ways, but maybe it's opening up other things. I mean, do you ever find that when you jump into a painting, are you digging into it the way they're digging into the math at all, or is it really always a letting go kind of process?
It's funny. Like a lot of my work sort of starts in the beginning with all the. Like I know that this piece is going to just say it's a Marilyn Monroe.
Right.
I know the background's going to be an Ohio Star repeating pattern. So a lot of it's just me sort of working out the production aspect of it, cutting these things out, doing these transfers, getting things ready, and then it's kind of like when I have all the ingredients, then I can start making.
So that's kind of like the studying for the test that you've started the process, you had the idea, then you got that week of prep. That's almost
and then
zen.
Now I can start this, but you have all the pieces together, so you don't have to think about that part of it.
Right.
But I feel like then the key thing, though, was that first step when you decide what you want to do.
Right. That's the most thought.
So what happens before that? What's gotten to you that point where you're like, oh, Marilyn Monroe and some Texas stars?
It's just kind of like anything, it builds.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2000, I was working for Adidas, and I was traveling all over the world, and I was photographing, especially we would go on road trips to places like Texas, to visit accounts, and I would photograph all the neon signs. Like, I felt like this was a cool part of America that was really going away, being replaced by these big box stores, and to me it was a shame, so I wanted to document that, and then I started making artwork based on that. And so it sort of just snowballed from there, and then when we had our first kid, and I'm like, well, I can't really travel like I was traveling, so I need to take it closer to home. And they were also kind of introspective and a little bit lonely. And I felt like I wanted the pieces to be more in your face, more happy, talk about like the sexiness of culture rather than sort of like the death of culture. And so that's when it started going in the direction of these icons. And I go back to those pieces every once in a while, too, because I really like them. I like that part of America. And I'm sure in the past 10 years, 15 years, a lot more of that stuff's gone.
And it's interesting because there's, across all of what we're talking about, there's a lot of emotion involved in these pieces. And in the work, even what you're doing. But although I guess you can separate yourself out when you're doing a NASA telescope from the emotion. But Ed, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the emotional element of these paintings and what has to go into them?
Oh, that's a good question. The emotionism. That's a really good question.
Yeah,
when I'm doing a painting, there's a sense of what I consider to be beautiful, but I can't articulate what that is. And when I get the desire to paint, it's totally irrational. I'll be just walking around my studio doing nothing, and I'll have to go out and do an errand or something, and suddenly this thought comes in, you must do a painting now. It's like, you just have to do that.
Yeah.
And I'll just turn the phone off and just start doing it, and I just have to. And the painting just emerges, and it's sort of coming from a very deep location, and I'm not really feeling emotion. It's more, this is a communication I have to put on the canvas.
Huh.
So there's not really happy, sad, or anything like that.
Right.
Now, a lot of times in my life when I've been like going through rough times and I do these artworks, people say, you should go through more rough times, these are really good. But for the most part, I'm not feeling that way. It's sort of going for, I try to go for my sense of harmony of the universe and putting that on a canvas and being very conscious of the colors, but there is a sense of making it beautiful, and I can't really articulate what that means, but I'm not feeling happy or sad or anything like that. It's a weird process.
So it's almost a centrally focused aesthetic, and it's not so much a positive or negative aesthetic.
Yeah, that's right. And it's sort of, if you've ever meditated before and you get in the meditative zone state, it's sort of like that. But you put energy on that and actually put that on a canvas, but there's more to it than that too. It's fairly complex. There's been a couple of times I've been really pissed off about something, and I'll do a sketch, and you can see the anger in it. But I don't try to do that because
anger art. You don't have a whole collection of anger art that's waiting for.
It's not a great thing. No,
Right.
I mean, people look at that and say, "God, you look angry in that." I say, "Yeah, I was. I was really pissed off." But I try to do paintings where people go, "Oh, that's nice." Someone saw my work the other day, and they said, "Oh, I just feel like meditating." You know, that was a compliment because I felt they were even the painting on wild colors all over the place. And even though there's wild colors, I'll still go for a sense of meditation, a sense of calm.
And maybe that is the emotion that's coming across, is meditative. I mean, you're coming across with sort of a positive, supporting iconography. You're coming across looking at supporting natural beauty, and you're coming across supporting this meditative state, unless you're pissed off.
And I think the reason I do that, if you want to get to the emotions, is because my mind is pretty chaotic.
Right.
I mean, it's a mess.
Right.
And I need to calm down. So
I think all of us are in that boat, but yes, I know that.
Yeah, but I want to calm down,
Right.
and if I look at a painting, I feel better. It's as simple as that. And so for me, it's desperation relief.
Right, right.
But it works well. I mean, it does calm me down.
It's therapeutic.
It's therapeutic. So the last thing I want to do is doing a picture of me being angry. You know, that's not the last thing I want to do.
Although that is a good piece, and I will add that I like that one.
Which one?
The one with you angry, yeah.
The person screaming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
The screen.
I want to see if there are any other questions that people want to jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
So I read a book recently that really inspired me that's kind of related to some of the comments people have gone around. It's called like The Inner Game of Tennis.
I've read that book.
And something that is sort of related to this is the idea of two selves. So like a self one and a self two. Self one is related to like your conscious thought, you're dictating like what you should be learning. In tennis it'd be like, where should I be holding my racket? In math it might be like, what are the equations that mean I have to do this? In art it might be like, I need to hold my paintbrush like this. But then there's self two, which is like your subconscious self, and that's like your kind of flow zone. You just let those tools disappear, you don't think about them at all, and you just like perform on some task.
I call that adrenaline.
But it's kind of related to this idea of like beauty, where you're not thinking about it at all, you're just sort of like performing. And like that performance sometimes comes from a really deep place that like surprises yourself. Like you hit a shot that you like didn't know you were gonna hit before, or you like have an inspiration for some idea that you like didn't think of. It just came from like a cool place.
And it's all about letting go, because that book really, I read it for playing trombone, and I would get really tense and not be able to loosen up. So when you guys are doing your art, you are kind of opening up and expressing in that way, but if you were approaching it with tension, you know, you have the tools side, you know, you're laying out your pieces, but how do you let go? And Inner Game of Tennis has its approach to doing that.
Yeah, and I feel like when I'm studying science right now, and I feel like when I like immerse myself in some subject and I'm just like reading a lot of papers and stuff like that, like I just sort of let my mind wander, and then sometimes an idea pops in my head, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, let's explore that. It's kind of like this curiosity-driven approach, but it definitely, I feel like, is beneath and before both art and science. And those are kind of both just like tools that you use to do these both things, but they're both kind of just about like being really aware and like being attuned to kind of subtleties and like reacting to that and like changing.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was saying before. You're connecting to this place where it's almost being in a state of complete awareness, and whatever awareness pops in, you put it on the canvas. And so you're like working with that. And if you get the conscious mind in on that act, it just cuts it right off.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Ed, don't let this go to your head, but I've always thought of you as a Renaissance man. And even though kind of a Da Vinci, but you don't have a beard. But there's another thing that we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the art and the science. But there's one other thing that Da Vinci had that influenced him seriously, and that was patronage. And in this day and age, we know it as the old saying goes, no bucks, no Buck Rogers.
Right.
So how do you get the guidance, either from NASA or from elsewhere, for your scientific work to decide, whether you're going to do the Mars work or the moon or the Lagrange points or things like that. So how do you combine? How's the patronage side fit into what you do?
Yeah, so I'm still a bit confused by your question. You mean the money part of it?
Yeah.
How does that influence the things?
Right.
Okay, well, that's a good point. I've been very lucky in the past 15 years that, actually more than that, that the funds have been there, but really for the most part, with no strict rules as to what I'm working on, just a general area. So in the field of science, I've been very lucky that I'm very directed. I've always been that way. I mean, I started painting pictures of satellites when I was 7 years old. So I've always been directed towards stuff like that. So when projects have come my way, they're usually about what I want to do anyhow. So it's not like I went out looking for them. I just got a phone call saying, are you interested in working on this? And it's pretty much what I wanted to do. And for people who have funded me in the sciences, like NASA, for example, they have asked me, well, what would you like to work on? And I have the opportunity to have that kind of discussion. The Boeing Corporation has been very nice in that regard, and the NASA too. So they're willing to pay to have these projects developed, but it's sort of a given. They're asking me what I'd like to do, so I have the opportunity to really dig into it. They're not saying you need to solve this problem. It's never put in that way. So in the sciences, it's that kind of situation. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah. The point is that Da Vinci also had this sort of give and take with his patrons on, what he wanted to do, what they wanted him to do, and so on.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what I wanted to get at, is the give and take.
It is give and take, and I've been very lucky in the regard that I've had a lot of situations where they say, what would you like to work on? They just ask me. Now, Da Vinci, I've been consulting a lot with the federal government via Boeing or NASA or these other organizations. So Da Vinci was also a defense contractor, the Italian military.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a defense contractor, but that freed him up to do his artwork. So in my case, I view myself as a researcher, where the research is primarily funded by the government. Now, I work with Princeton, but my arrangement there is entirely different, and there I just get to work on whatever I want, and there's the give or take that is just totally what I want to work on. But the other ones where there's more of a cash flow going on, they're not saying to me, you have to work on this. There's been a few occasions that's happened, and if I'm not interested and I just won't work on it, I don't care how bad I need the money, I just will not do it.
But you guys also, as mathematicians, you have some more flexibility because there's so many applications that come out of it. And we don't have to go too deep into this subject, but there are a lot of other fields, other sciences, where they're not going to have that same luxury to say, today I'm going to focus on this element or that. And
Yeah.
Bob, since you've got a million projects.
I do whatever I want to do. That's
Right.
the beauty of it. That's the wonderful thing about academic freedom. I have to teach my classes, which I like, but I
Right.
have to do that, and it's got a syllabus I have to follow. But
Right.
for the research part of it, whatever I want to work on, when I wake up in the morning or see something during the day that's cool. And the last several weeks, I've been studying how a slinky falls when you let go of it.
That's awesome.
And the mathematics is beautiful, and it's the wave
Right.
equation. So there's another way waves
exactly.
come into things.
Just imagine,
Yeah.
Hokusai. Let me go ahead and ask if there's one last question, and then we'll go ahead and carry over. Yes.
I was just wondering, so we're talking about a lot of arts and sciences. Would you believe that the world's kind of centered on specialization naturally, or integration? Do you think our society forces specialization upon us to meet like demands, or like you go to a school and you have to find one major, right? Like, do you think it's more natural to integrate, or do you think that's pushing against culture?
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
I feel very strongly about this one.
Me too.
Yeah. We're probably hoping to say the same thing. I don't know.
Go for it.
Okay. I think there's a tremendous push for specialization. I mean, things have gotten a lot more difficult, and if you want to make any kind of progress in your subject now, you have to focus. There's really no way to get around that. And a lot of the grants you apply for, like when Bob was talking about research, a lot of it's funded by research grants. They're very specific what you can apply for and what kind of results they're expecting. So I think if you're applying for a grant, say with the National Science Foundation, and it's in mathematics to do some mathematical project, you can't get back to them and say, well, I need to do a sculpture first, and then I'll do the math part. They're going to say, well, you're not going to get funded. It's just
There are grants for that, but we can talk about that later.
Okay. Well, I mean, for the most part. I would love to see more of a fusion, but I have found quite the opposite, is that when you go to the science community, like this is my personal experience, and I've said of an artist, they don't take you seriously. They think I'm doing digital art or something, and they say, well, you can't be a good scientist or mathematician because you're spending so much time on art. So there's a total bias against mixing those things up. So I know there's been more of a push lately towards the fusion because the job market's gotten a little bit more insecure. So they're trying to teach, some of these colleges now are trying to teach people, you have many majors, not just one, a lot of majors and all different, so you can be able to do different things to make ends meet. So I think that in that sense that there's more of a dispersion. But I think that given how difficult things are today, it's very hard, given the fact that they pay lots of bills with lots of time limits on bills, unless you have a tenured position somewhere, which most people don't. I think that you have to be very conscious of digging into some area very, very thoroughly.
And Bob?
So I think what you just described is the reality.
Okay.
And and I find it to be a little bit disappointing that there's not more encouragement. No, not your explanation wasn't disappointing. But it's a little bit disappointing that our culture, our society doesn't encourage a broader view. And the thing that comes to my mind when you bring this up is my PhD thesis advisor told me that in life you're judged on the best thing you did. Not that you did 100 things that were all really cool, but just the one thing that you did best. Mm-hmm. And that's just kind of an unfortunate reality in my opinion.
Yeah, I just want to make one little comment to underscore this. This was a shock to me. After I got my doctorate from school, a few blocks away, NYU, my area specialty was celestial mechanics. I worked under a famous guy, Jürgen Moser. Went to Boston University, started teaching, and I decided I wanted to go off into a different area. I wanted to go to, it's called Jordan algebra. It's totally different from celestial mechanics. And the chairman of the department said you shouldn't work on that because you won't get tenure. So not only are things specialized, you can't even do different things in your own subject. So it's very, very tight, and that's my personal experience.
So you both are actually answering the question in recognizing there's a reality there, but not necessarily happy with how it is.
Right.
And I think that's a good place to end the discussion, because what I'm hoping is from this discussion, people will start asking what else can be done. How can we change it? How can we bring more Rob Marses in to kind of help people think differently, have their let go moments? We're going to go ahead and close it up right now. I'd like to say thank you to all of you for coming, and certainly to Ed and Bob and Rob for taking the time here. And if you can join me across in Minerva, we have some refreshments and some drinks. We encourage you to order some dinner and support the restaurant. Tip your servers. And thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. That was great.
Very good.